We start this 4 o'clock hour. Steve Robertson covers Mississippi State, genespage.com. It's a 247. And I had somebody in the chat room say that Steve had made a comment about people were already starting to look at Mississippi State's roster in this, which has been a brutal week because of the loss of Mike Leach. And Steve Robertson joins us now on 365 Sports. Steve, is that true that other teams were starting to try to poach the roster?
Well, I don't know if we can tie it back to teams with evidence just yet, but some third parties, some of these mentors out here that approach some players from what I understand. And I'm looking into it. And if we get any names and evidence, we'll make all that stuff public. And if anybody's involved in that, they're a disgusting human being. I understand that business goes on, but Mike Leach's death was just announced yesterday. And I understand the college coaching profession doesn't always have great guys involved in it, but this is just completely tacky, and if anybody's involved in it, we're going to make that information public.
Steve, Zach Arnett elevated to head coach permanently. This is a move that, while quickly, probably they needed to do this for the team, right? For these guys to not have to not only go through losing a head coach, but having to sit through a prolonged coaching search and wondering what their futures are going to be in Starkville.
Absolutely. And it was the right call. And to be honest with you, I mean, in some respects, he's kind of been the unofficial coach in waiting. Zach Arnett was going to be a head coach. There was little doubt about that. And former athletic director John Cohen had told me on multiple occasions, he goes, hey, when Leach decides to hang him up, and there was no sign of that happening anytime soon, just so you guys know, he felt like we already had the guy in hand in-house with Zach Arnett. So the move is not surprising. National Signing Day is next week. And then, of course, you've got this, the potential tampering stuff. And so this gives Zach and the staff a chance to settle the roster and also put this recruiting class to bed. But also, too, you begin to think, with Coach Leach passing, you begin to focus now on the living. And there's a staff of assistant coaches that, a week ago thought everything was great. Things are turning in the right direction to now wondering if they're even going to have a job. And there may still be some attrition on the staff, but the reality of it is this is the move that makes sense for Mississippi State. It's probably a move that we're having to make earlier than we expected due to circumstances, but it is absolutely the right decision. And Zach Arnett is a brilliant coach, and I have no doubt that he'll do a great job.
For those that don't know much about Zach Arnett, outside of, as a younger guy, a defensive-minded guy, what would you kind of give us a sort of Cliff's Notes on what to expect as far as his traits, his personality, and things like that?
Well, I had a Mississippi State administrator call me Monday night when, we'd all kind of come into grips with the fact that Mike Leach wasn't going to make it. And they said, what are your thoughts about Zach Arnett if we decided to make that move? And the thing that I thought was most important is he has the respect of the locker room. And when you have that, you have everything. His kids play exceptionally hard for him. He is a very hard-line coach that believes in competing at the highest level. And that's what guys want. They want to be coached. They want to get better. And I think in 3 years, Zach Arnett has shown that he can coach his guys up on that side of the football. And, who he decides to hire as an offensive coordinator, that's the big step right now. And I'm sure he'll have a defensive coordinator, and perhaps they promote Matt Brock from inside. I think that's a big part of it, too, is just kind of how you get everybody placed. But, we'll see some comings and goings. But the reality of it is Zach Arnett kind of fits the value system and the profile of Mississippi State as a very blue-collar, hardworking person.
Steve, you had the week that we've seen since, Sunday night with Mike Leach, and then yesterday early morning, we had the story that he passed away. We've talked to a lot of different people about him. What was the week like for you?
Absolutely miserable. And Sunday morning, I got a text from a donor that said, hey, there are emergency vehicles outside of Mike Leach's house. You know what's going on? And so I began making some phone calls, and people say, well, he's still kind of dealing with, the final remnants of that bout with pneumonia. Could be a breathing treatment situation. He's had some shortness of breath as of late. Could be connected to that. And then within an hour, I started getting reports that this situation is very serious, potentially life-threatening. And at that point, they were discussing airlifting him to Jackson, which is our capital city, and much better medical facilities there. And at that point, you're just hoping that he can come through. And then you start getting more details about kind of his condition. And it really seemed like a hopeless case. And Mike Leach was my friend. He wasn't just somebody that I covered. And I kind of crossed my own professional boundaries with Mike because, I always tell my staff is, these guys are not your friends. You got to keep them at arm's length so you can be objective about them. But Mike was so engaging, and he showed such an interest in other people. And I've shared this with so many people. The day after the Egg Bowl, I drove 17 hours to go be with my wife, who's working out of state for a couple months, and I've been absolutely miserable without her. And so he called me a couple days later, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on with the bowl game? What are you hearing?" Just kind of catching up. And I said, "Well, Coach, I'd love to come by and visit with you, but I'm out of state." And he's like, "Oh, well, where are you?" And I told him, I said, "With my wife, and just kind of enjoying some downtime with her." He goes, "Hey, let me talk to her. I need to let her know what a good guy she has." And he gets on the phone with her, and he starts talking about how much he loves and respects me and what I do for Mississippi State. And he says, "Hey, I'm sorry you couldn't make it home for Thanksgiving, and I want you to know that we won the Egg Bowl just for you." Who does that? It's he's just an amazing guy. And then he gave us some restaurant recommendations because he's so well traveled. He's eaten everywhere and been everywhere. And 2 days later, he texted me to see how the meal was. It's like, and I've done my best over the course of the last 3 days to kind of illustrate that. People think about him being this cartoon character and this mad scientist. He may be the most genuine person I've ever known.
I think that's the best description one of the better descriptions we've heard him in the last couple of days. And, people from everywhere that's covered him have had very emotional responses to that. And that is the rule in our business, right, Steve, is you're not supposed to be friends. But Mike Leach just didn't seem like he cared about labels all that much of coach, reporter, this and that. He was kind of just a student of life and someone a Renaissance man.
Well, and not only that too, but there are a lot of people out there that are in love with what they know, and they can't wait to tell everybody. And Mike had some element of that. He loved to perform and entertain and kind of be the center of attention. But one-on-one with him, he really wanted to know about you, what made you tick. And I've been clean and sober now 31 years and 4 days, And so recently he had called me and he said, "Hey, I'd like to come by the office if you got some time." And he goes, "I just want to know your story. How does somebody stay sober that long? What's the key to long-term recovery?" And I don't think it was really an issue for Mike. I think he just kind of wanted to know what made me tick. And that's the thing. He just pulls you in because he has such a genuine interest in you and what's going on with you. And the very first time I interviewed him, he interviewed me for 30 minutes, kind of knowing my story, my background, and my family, and how I kind of came to be in Starkville and become a Mississippi State person. And it's just one of those situations where you think you know somebody, and there's so many people that told me, "Steve, you're the luckiest guy in America because you get to cover Mike Leach every day." And I did not understand what an honor and privilege that was truly going to be until I got a chance to spend some one-on-one time with him. And one of the last things, it's amazing. Like Saturday morning, I get up, take my dogs outside, and I grab my phone. I've got texts from Mike Leach, and it's a list of 6 places you have to stay in New Mexico. And it's like, I told my wife, I got all emotional thinking about this when the reality of the situation kind of unfolded. I said, there he was in the last full day of his life at 3:26 in the morning. He could have been thinking about recruiting, could have been thinking about the bowl game. He could have been thinking about staffing. He was thinking about me and you and what he could do to help us have a better time the next time that we're together. And that's just a story that I think is important to share with people just because of the fact that he was such an endearing person. And I don't know that aspect of his personality was really promoted that often.
Well, Steve, that's an incredible story, man. That really is. And congratulations on the 3 decades clean and sober. That's an incredible feat, man. It's really, truly a great thing. So congratulations on that. I guess I saw the memorial service next Tuesday. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1:00 at Humphrey Coliseum, and it's going to be open to the public. And I want to take one more quick story that before we go.
Sure.
Kind of related to recovery. And, Leach is like never cares about anything. Like he's never worried about optics or anything like that or what people, he just does what he wants to do. And so one day I'd asked him, I said, "Coach, let's get a picture together," and I was at practice that day and wanted to show my kids, because, it's just life today. You document everything. And so I had on a Lily and Act shirt, which is one of my favorite bands, and I'm friends with those guys. And so before we take the picture, Coach is like, "Hang on, I got to see what you're wearing." And I was like, "Coach, it's just a band shirt." And he looked it over, and he goes, "Well, I guess it's okay." I said, "What are you looking for?" He goes, "Well, I can't I can't just have my picture taken with somebody wearing a legalized marijuana T-shirt. I got to be careful what I'm endorsing here. And he said, so I just want to make sure that I'm safe to have my picture taken next to you. And I was like, I joked about that today on social media. It's like, that sounds so silly, but it's like he was such a guy that didn't really care. He was really just kind of getting my goat a little bit. But even then, he was kind of cognizant of that sort of stuff about, maybe this isn't the best of decisions. And I used that image when I wrote the story, My Friend the Pirate, which is very difficult to write because, at that point, I know that he's passing away and you're recounting all these wonderful memories. And it's just, I wish we had been friends longer.
Yes, Steve, you told your story. We had somebody on yesterday that told a story about how he just reached out to make sure that their trip was great. Just randomly did it. That you just validate everything that we've heard throughout the week, which is the best part about, unfortunately, a horrible story, is how much now people know the kind of person Mike Leach was outside of the football coach. Zach Arnett, he's kind of young in the coaching business. He played at New Mexico. I think he was under Rocky Long's staff for a while. The connections there as well.
Well, what's interesting about that, too, is when Leach got the job, he tried to hire Rocky. He tried to get Rocky to come out of retirement. He told me before Rocky Long is the best defensive coordinator in the history of college football. And so he couldn't get Rocky to come out of retirement, so Rocky recommended Arnett, who had never been a coordinator. He had played for Rocky and, of course, had been a linebacker coach and a GA for Rocky. And so he was a long disciple. And so he came highly recommended. So Mike hired him and just kind of gave him the keys to the defense and said, hey, you go run the defense and I'll stay out of your way. He's given him the autonomy to do that. Now he's your head coach. It's amazing how it all kind of comes together.
Steve, thanks for jumping on with us late notice. Appreciate your time. And I know you'll be working on that story about any possible tampering or poaching or whatever. I hope to God that's not true. But if it is, I know you'll find out what it is.
Me and you both. Thank you guys for your time.
Steve Robertson, 247, covers Mississippi State.